This is the end of the session for Jazz and Nash, and normally I would have dogs in the shot, but Nash broke one of his nails off, and so I had to go to the vet, and he just finally laid down, so we're going to let him settle. Good point for you watching at home, don't let your dog's nails get too long, because the longer they get, the easier they can break them, and in some cases you have to amputate the nail, which you don't want to do. Alright, so these dogs basically didn't have a lot of rules, and as a result they thought that they were the same authority as their humans. And this, if you watch a lot of my videos, this is a pretty common mistake a lot of people make. Not only that, but they would invade the humans' personal space and the humans would pet them, or they would nudge the humans and the humans would pet them. So to the dogs, I can tell the humans what to do and they do it. So I have dominion over the humans. That means I'm responsible for the humans. If I'm responsible for the humans, then I'm more reactive to people walking by the house, which is absolutely the case we have here. So in order to change the leader-follower dynamic, the guardians are going to need to incorporate rules to help the dog start to identify like a follower. Some of the rules that I suggested, rule number one would be no furniture for a minimum of 30 days. That takes at least 30 days for our neural pathways, our dog's neural pathways to realign. However, I would continue to keep it off the furniture until Jazz is no longer hurting Nash in the backyard. They're no longer rushing the door and barking and ignoring you guys. So it might take a couple months, however long. And sometimes my clients are like, after a month of no dogs in the furniture, we're kind of like, we're going to keep this as a permanent rule. Because we have a baby in the house, right now the baby's got some stuff there in front of the TV, but I would put a big dog bed there. And if you go to my website, what I do is basically I just toss a treat onto the dog bed. When the dog goes in and touches it with its lips, I would say the word stage, castle, beach, palace, whatever you want to make the dog bed as a name. This way you can command and direct the dog to go to the dog bed. Anytime we take away the furniture, I always want to give the dog a dog bed at the same time. So I would strongly recommend you guys look into doing that. Alright, other rules. The dog should have to sit before we let it in or out of a door. If it doesn't sit within a couple seconds of me saying sit, don't ask. Say sit. If they don't sit, walk away from the door for 1 minute. Come back to the door and say sit again. If Nash sits and Jazz doesn't, I let Nash go out and walk away from the door. 2 minutes this time. Next time for 4 minutes. Next time for 8 minutes. Careful your finger. And I keep doing that and doubling the time until the dog sits. And as soon as that butt hits the ground, I let that door open. Now, start doing this with the leverage. So if the dog would rather be outside, start it with the dog inside. But eventually we want to do it with both ways. Once the dog will go and sit at the door to tell you I want to go outside, then the next step would be to do the same thing I showed you on the front door, where you put the dog on a leash, go to the door, and pop it open. That movement is a strong attractor to dogs to want to go forward. So help them practice that, just so that, especially for Jazz, that she understands just because the door's swinging open doesn't mean I have permission to go out. That will help prevent her from door dashing. Remember, for humans, whoever's walking in front, or for dogs, whoever's in front is considered a leader, whoever's behind is considered a follower. So we want to make sure that when we're going outside with the dogs, that we go out the door first. This is the exercise I showed at the front door. So we went to the door, I had the dog in a leash, I put it in a sit. Then I popped that door open. As soon as I did that, Jazz got up and she wanted to go forward. I corrected with the leash, put her back into a sit, repeated it 4 or 5 times, and eventually I could swing it open and she just stayed there. We're helping her practice the behavior we want her to do in this activity. And this is kind of a constant theme that we had throughout this session. So anytime the dogs are doing something that we don't want them to do, we want to recreate the situation, help them practice it in individual steps. We did this for the door exercise, and if you go to my website, doggonproblems.com, there's a bunch, you type in door exercise on the search page, you'll find tons of examples. Another example I lost my train of thought. I also like the guardians to get in the habit of claiming their 1-foot bubble of personal space. The dogs just frequently invaded their space and the humans would pet them. Now to prevent that, we're going to use the escalating consequences to disagree with the unwanted behavior, but we also want the dogs to practice a new behavior. And in order to do that, we're going to add a little bit of structure to petting. I consider petting our dogs our way of paying them. So I'd like the guardians to start petting the dogs with a purpose. If the dog nudges me or jumps up on me, instead of petting them, I'm going to give them a counter order, tell them to sit. As soon as they sit, I'm going to scratch them under their chin and say the word sit only. Not good sit, not good dog. After a while, the dog's going to come and start sitting in front saying, look, I'm prepaying for some attention, can you hook me up? And we definitely should, as much as we can. We also will tell each other if one of the guardians comes in the room and sees that I'm petting the dog and it's standing, we'd say paycheck, I would stop petting, and I would say sit. Dog sits, I pet her on the chin, say sit. Then I would turn to my partner and say, actually, I told the dog to sit before he came in. When the dog heard you come up the stairs, it stood up and I continued to pet, which David says is allowed, which it is. If you want to pet the dog just because you feel like it, the dog didn't nudge, just tell the dog to sit or lay down or come to you or do something to change its state to earn it, unless it prepays for it. I also wanted the guardians to start using passive training. So every time the dog comes to them, the guardians are going to need to figure out what that word is. Sometimes it was come, sometimes it was come here, sometimes it was here. So we want to make sure that it's consistent. We're all using the same nomenclature. So if it's come, every time the dog comes to us, we're going to pet it and say come. Every time the dog sits next to us, we're going to pet it and say sit. Every time it lays down, we're going to pet it and say chill. We want to do that within 3 seconds for the dog to make the connection. After you do that for a month or two, you can say chill, the dog will lay down anticipating getting that reward. Let me see, what else? The escalating consequences. The very first thing we're going to do is hiss 1 time per incident and match the intensity of your hiss with the dog's intensity. If the dog comes back a second time, the second move is I stand up abruptly and turn to face the dog. Remember, my authority goes whichever direction my belly button is pointing. So I'm going to pivot, try to keep my feet in place, and keep pivoting until the dog is stationary. As soon as the dog stands still, I step back. It can stand, it can sit, it can lie down in terms of staying still. Make sure as soon as it does, you take that left-right or right-left back, and then pause for a 1/4 of a second or so. That's a conversation. If the dog stays still and we don't do anything, the dog thinks, well, that's not what they wanted. So make sure you take a step back. You could also sit down, but when you sit down, you lose some authority. When I was having one of the guardians define her personal space, this became a recurring theme. When she sat down, the dog would come closer. It's okay if it happens. Just keep repeating the situation over and over again until the dog understands that she wants a 1-foot bubble of personal space. Another thing that we went over was the trash. The dogs like to get in the trash. So we would do a variation of that leadership exercise that I showed the guardians, where in this case we put the trash can in the middle of the floor in between the humans and the TV. We're going to put something really stinky good on top of it, and then we're going to sit down on the couch. The dog can circle, but it can't get within 3 feet of the trash can. As soon as it turns towards, we're going to make the hiss. I guess I didn't finish the escalating consequences. I jump around, so let me go through. First thing we do is hiss 1 time, match the intensity of the hiss with the dog. Second thing we do is we stand up, turn and face the dog until it's stationary, take that step back. Third consequence, this is where I left off last time, is I'm going to march directly at the dog without hitting the counter. And I'm going to keep marching at the dog with intent. I typically say march. I don't mean stomping. I mean moving briskly forward. We want to give the dog a flinching experience. It's the suddenness of your movement that makes the dog want to move back. Now when we stand up abruptly for the second consequence. When we march towards the dog, we march towards the dog with intent or with steam. I'm going to keep marching at the dog until it does this. When it turns sideways or greater, that's its way of saying I've stopped challenging you. So as soon as it does, you stop in place. Then we go to the second consequence and we pivot and follow the dog until it's stationary. Then we take a step backwards and then we can go back to doing what we're doing. The fourth consequence is we're going to put the dog on a leash timeout. We're going to stand on the leash about 3 feet away from the dog where it's attached to the dog's collar. If there was a temper tantrum, we don't say anything. We wait for it to settle down. When it does, it'll sit down as far away as the leash will allow. It'll be a tense leash. So I take my foot that's on the end of the leash and I slide it towards the dog as soon as it sits. Don't tell the dog to sit or lie down. That's it, following a command. I want the dog to do it on its own because it realizes now it's lost its freedom because it was challenging. So as soon as the dog sits, we slide the foot towards the leash, towards the dog, take the tension off the leash. When the dog lays down and is calm, then I take my foot off the leash. Now at this point, the dog's going to get up and walk around dragging the leash. A dog should not drag the leash around unsupervised. It's dangerous. But if a minute or two later it starts doing the wrong thing, I can step on the leash as it runs by and reapply the consequence. Or, on the other hand, if the dog stays good, after a couple minutes I take the leash off. It's not quid pro quo. And this is my atom bomb. So, I mean, you hiss just to warn the dog not to do it. Then it does it anyway, so you stand up. Then he does it again, so you march at him. Then he does it again, so they lose all freedom with the leash timeout. At first, it's going to be hiss, stand up, leash, or rush, then leash. After a while, you won't have to do the leash. Then you won't have to do the march. Then you won't have to do the stand. I can get my dogs to drop a live squirrel out of their mouth with a hiss because they know I'm going to follow through. It's also something I'd like the guardians to get in the habit of doing is following through right away. If I ask the dog to do something and it doesn't do it, I'm going to get up and follow the dog until it does the thing that I want consistently. It's not convenient, but if we do it consistently for a couple weeks, the dog will realize the humans are not playing anymore and listening is no longer optional. They're serious about it and they're willing to follow through. If you're not willing to get up and follow through to the dog, that means you don't really mean it. We also don't want to repeat the command word to a dog over and over again. If I'm working to get the dog to come to me, I'm going to say here or come or whatever the command is. If the dog doesn't come, then I usually make a kissing sound. I'm going to make a soft one because the dogs are both asleep and I don't want to wake them up, but more of a, I got an ear movement here. That usually gets the dog to look at you. I always hold my treat like this, my hand like this, with this part of the arm parallel with the floor. I start out with a 90-degree bend facing the dog. I'm just doing it sideways so you can see it. If I say come and the dog looks at me, usually with this hand motion, it'll run right over. If it doesn't, I make the kissing sound. As soon as it looks at me, I start lowering my hand. The lower you go, the more it's for the dog. Don't just go like this. Go all the way to the floor if you have to. Eventually that dog would come over. When it comes to you, if this is the dog's snout and these are the eyes, I hold my hand slightly above their snout with curled fingers so they cannot see there's nothing in my hand. And don't be sloppy about it. Maybe like, make sure if you're going like this, then pretend like you're pulling a treat out and go and sell it, pantomime it. Now if the dog comes over to you, if you want it to sit, what I do is I don't go vertically up or horizontally, I go at an arc over their head. As they track up, their butt will go down. As soon as their butt hits the ground, I lower it, they tilt their head down, lick it off my finger, on my hand, and then I tickle them under the chin while I say the command word simultaneously. Anytime you give a treat, the dog should hear the command word the same second the treat touches their lips. That's what connects them together. I also talked about coffee for closers. If the guardians are watching this later, if you haven't done it yourself, search coffee for closers on YouTube. There's a great scene from Glengarry Glen Ross where Alec Baldwin kills it. But basically, it's a variation of that concept. What I would have the guardians do, pull out a treat and say, come. Whichever dog comes and sits in front of me first gets the treat. Whoever comes second doesn't get a darn thing. Right now, these dogs are competing for the human's attention, and it's jealousy. Well, now we're going to create a different dynamic where the dogs come and compete to be obedient to get the attention from the human. When both dogs come up at the same time, then I can give them the same reward. But if one dog comes right away and the other dog comes 5 minutes later and it gets the same reward, there's no motivation for the dogs to do what I want. Let me see. One of the other problems, we want to practice the door exercise. This is one we really want to practice this multiple times every day until we get to the point where the dogs just stay at the top of the stairs. So I want the guardians to call or text one another when they're coming home, or if we have visitors coming over, close the door and ask them to knock on the door like crazy so we can practice this. If you forget how to do it, if you go to doggoneproblems.com and click the dog training tips link on the right side of the page, actually over here for you, there'll be a search box, type in door exercise, there'll be a whole bunch of videos of me doing it with other clients. I also showed the dogs a focused exercise and a leadership exercise. Those are also two things that you can search for on my website. Now, for the leadership exercise, or for both of them actually, Nash was too worked up with a broken nail and everything else. He wasn't paying attention. We're going to need him to be more centered, so we practice with Jazz. Remember, for the focus exercise, it's two movements. We're going to put our hands with the treats on our knees, and when the dog looks up at us in our face, we're going to go like about 6 inches in front of our nose and then travel towards the dog's mouth. Say the word focus every time the treat goes in the dog's mouth. At first, it's 1 second, 1 second. After a day or two, it's going to be 1 second, 2 seconds. Then eventually, it's going to be 1 second, 20 seconds. But make sure you're very progressive to get there, because we want to maintain the dog staring at our face the whole time. Doesn't have to be eye contact, just facial contact. The leadership exercise, where we put the treat on the floor and walk away from it. Again, go to Doggone Problems and search for leadership exercise. There'll be a bunch of videos where I kind of explain it in detail. The last couple of things I want to talk about, well, we're going to go to structured feeding time. Nash needs to put on more weight, and the guardian's been leaving food out, and it's a natural human instinct to do that, but a lot of times the dog thinks, well, the food's always there, I can eat it whenever I want. We want to take the food away whenever the dog walks away from the bowl. That motivates them to eat as much as they can when they have access to it. Let me see. One of the things I want to have the guardians do is work on teaching the dog not to rush the fence. They're not aggressive dogs, but they are a little bit territorial, and there's some little kids that live next door, and if they climb on top of the fence, the dogs rush over. They never do anything, but that rushing can be upsetting for the kids, and the guardians don't want their dogs to act that way. So what I would do, and this is something else you can search on my website, counter conditioning. I do it as all one word. What I would do is put Nash, or whichever dog, on a leash. I would work out with my neighbors ahead of time so they're in on it with us. And then I have the dog, I'm at the far side of the lawn of the yard. The neighbors are over here with the kids, we're on this side of our backyard. I put the dog in a sit, I pull out one of the high value tricky trainer treats, which are like this, and I'm gonna squish it. This is a hard one because it's been in my pocket for a while. And I'm gonna let the dog nibble on it. So when I put it in front of the dog's mouth, I can control where the dog looks by moving the treat up and down, and I want the dog looking at the children over there. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the dog start to chew on this, and then we're going to nod. And we nod, the kid climbs up the fence. So the dog is getting the treat delivered before the kid does it. Then when the treat's almost gone, we're going to say, we're going to nod again or work out a different signal, and then the kid gets down. And we're going to do this with the dog on the far side of the fence. We're going to do this a couple times until the dog is very relaxed and is getting the treats, but they're looking at the kid the whole time. Once we've done it a couple times, then we're going to take one step closer to where the kids are and repeat the process. Now, to do counter conditioning, you don't have to put the dog in a sit and you don't have to use a leash. These are two things that I use to make it easier. The sit indicates to me that the dog is comfortable with the scenario. If it's too intense, the dog will get up. So as we get closer and closer, if I have difficulty putting the dog into a sit, I know that I'm getting close to the dog's breaking point. And for counter conditioning, you can't push past the breaking point. Once the dog reacts, you've invalidated all the work you did. So when we get to the point where the dog looks around the treat or doesn't want to sit, I know I'm at my breaking point. Next time I might either stop there, or next time I have a good repetition, I stop at that point. And then the treats go, I would have the kids go away first, and then we walk inside. So this way the dog can't rush the fence and gets practice sitting here looking at the kids climbing the fence. And if I sit here, I get the highest value treat I've ever had. Next day we go out, maybe we're say 3 steps closer to the yard before the dog wouldn't sit down. Next day we go back to that same mark, practice it again. Maybe this time we take 2 steps or 5 steps. Go at the dog's pace. Eventually we want to get to the point where the fence is right here and the dog is watching the kid climb up the fence and is no longer reacting. This way we allow the neural pathways to realign and we help the dog establish a new behavior. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier with the trash can and the door exercise. We want to recreate situations when we are not in the actual moment. The guardian mentioned that they had a birthday party for their daughter and we had 40 people here and he could not control the dogs. That's a horrible time to try to train the dogs because we're trying to be a good host and pay attention to the dogs and all the duties that come with being a host. There's just too many things going on at once. So instead, I suggest the guardians have a friend come over and play the part of a guest who's in on it. So this way, if we have to stop talking to the guest to go correct the dogs, we can help. The guest is fine with it. We don't feel guilty about it. We take the pressure off ourselves, which we're more relaxed, and our timing is going to be much better because we're not distracted by other things. Okay, I'm sure that I'm leaving out some other things, but if the guardians know that they can, like all my clients, call me, and I'm always available to my clients. Oh, the last thing, yeah, we worked on a structured walk. That's the video that I'm upset that I didn't film. Make sure the 4 rules for a structured walk. Rule number 1, dog needs to stay in position. So one dog is going to be on the right for every human and on the left for every human, so they know this is my place in the position. Rule number 2 is my arm needs to go straight down. If I'm tensing it up like this or I'm pulling back, I'm putting tension on the leash. There should be no tension on the leash. Be a short leash, but not a tense leash. I prefer a 4-foot leash. We're going to use the martingale collar for Jazz with the special twist of the leash around the chest to prevent her from pulling. Rule number 3 is no stopping and sniffing. They can sniff as long as they're going. Now this is a structured walk. To say the dogs could not sniff ever would be cruel. But right now, we need these dogs to settle down and learn to look at their humans, and a structured walk is a great way to help develop that skill set. The 4th rule is neither dog's really doing, but we don't let dogs mark on a structured walk. That's a leadership quality. Remember when we're correcting the dog, it's a quick jerk and then immediately relaxing the leash. Now, one of the things I'd like the guardians to do is call to have me come back later this summer and to train the dogs to walk at a heel so they don't pull on the leash at all and we don't have to use any leash corrections. But right now we have a young kid, we have a lot of things going on, so we want to use a tool that's going to allow it, and it allows us to avoid using the prong collar and the choke chain, which are 2 tools that I just don't like using at all because it channels force and getting the dog to behave out of fear of punishment as opposed to knowing what you want. I'd rather teach the dog this is what I want and I will reward you for walking this way. So hopefully the guardians will give me a call and we can work on that and the stay. Also, teaching the dogs to stay would probably be a good trick for these dogs. If you go to YouTube, Teach Any Dog the Perfect Stay is the title of the video that I use. It's a different instructor. He's really good. It's positive reinforcement. We teach the dog to stay for the 3 Ds. First for duration, then for distance, then for distraction. Most people try to do them all at once. So watch the video, just search for it, message me if you can't find it, I'll send you a link. It's a great video. Teaching them more self-control and helping them practice self-control, like having to wait for permission to eat their food, to go out the door, to get petted. All these things are going to help them start to see the humans as the authority figures, make them less reactive to passersby, neighbor kids climbing the fence, and so on. Okay, that's the roadmap to success for Nash and Jazz. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.